Hey guys, this is a quick video I wanted to put out on changing an oil pump on a newer Milwaukee 8 Harley-Davidson. I happen to have a 2017 Street Glide Special that I wanted to upgrade the oil pump to the latest revision due to different things they've had going on with sumping and stuff like that. So this is my experience. So I put the video together to show what I basically went through. Maybe it'll help you. So feel free to check it out. But I hate to throw this out there, but I don't work for Harley-Davidson, and I'm not being paid by anybody. So make sure to reference your appropriate manuals, Harley-Davidson service manuals, things like that. So, because I don't want to have anybody coming after me because they made a mistake. But with that said, hopefully you'll find some things in here that maybe will help you out if you're going to be changing an oil pump. And ride safe, and we'll see you on the road. Right here, I'm rotating the back tire to get the rear cylinder on top dead center. Marking the cam and the crank sprockets, so hopefully I can keep the chain synced up the same. Here the timing chain tensioner is coming off. Okay, so here you're going to need the cam crankshaft sprocket tool. I got mine over at George's Garage. When you remove the cam and the crank sprockets and chain, make sure you don't lose that spacer behind the cam. Everybody likes to see a good unboxing, right? That's the best part of the video. Okay, so this is just a little bit of a visual comparison of the old pump that just came out on the right there and the new pump on the left. So the first thing I was kind of looking at was a seal plate. Obviously the new one on the left, you can actually see the new design with the seal, whereas the older one didn't have that. Then next I was kind of curious as far as the passageway cutouts and such. I've got the gear rotors still in the one there, but you can kind of see the cutouts are they're a little different. Supposedly that's one of the designs too that's supposed to help. So Okay, so this is pretty well self-explanatory. Assembly lube going on all the moving parts of the new oil pump. And this is going to be the first piece going back in. This is the oil pump seal plate. This is going to be the new rear O-ring that I'm lubing up to go back in. This is a pretty important step since you won't be able to see behind the oil pump, but make sure you get that rear oil pump port seated in that O-ring, otherwise you're probably going to have some pressure problems. This is the second O-ring you're going to be replacing. The two are physically different. One's actually yellow and the other's black. I believe this one here was the black one. So pay attention to that when you are putting them back in. There might be a stamp mark or two different on these cam plates, but otherwise I didn't see anything else that was different. Yeah, this is pretty much about where shit goes downhill. Trying to push up on that cam with my hands, yeah, not so much. It didn't matter what I did, jiggling, trying to push up with my hands, but I wasn't going to put a tool in there and possibly damage anything. So bottom line is that lifters, they must have sagged a little on there and it pushed the cam down a little, so I couldn't get the plate back on. Okay, so yesterday was Thanksgiving. I went as far as I could. Since I couldn't get the cam plate back on, I called it quits, stuffed my face, drank my drink, watched some football, and today I faced the facts that I'm going to have to loosen these push rods up to get the pressure off the lifters and off that cam in order to go any further with this project. So that's what I'm starting to do right here. 5/16 inch wrench, loosen the jam nuts and start winding these push rods down so I can get the slack off. Okay, here you can see my handy dandy tool that I made that you see on the internet, which is just a rubber band and a bent paper clip. So to hold the push rod tubes up while I shorten the length of the push rods. So here I've taken out both intake and exhaust push rods on the front cylinder. Originally I was trying to minimize this. I screwed all 4 of them in 25 turns, and I thought, well, the cam was loose so I could do what I needed to, but I wouldn't really have a way to get in to be able to feel that front cylinder, the lifters, to make sure that when they're on overlap, that way I can work on the aft cylinder. So I just took the forward ones out, that way I can feel where the lifters are when they get on overlap. Okay, so this point here, I'm just trying to show that the cam plate is definitely bottomed out or flush with the base of the cam chest cavity mounting surface. Okay, so at this point with blue Loctite on the screws, I'm going to go ahead and start all the screws that go back into the cam plate, support plate, including the 4 that hold the oil pump assembly in. Once you get that, then the screws 1 and 2 get torqued to the initial torque of 12 to 60 inch-pounds, which you'll see here in just a minute. So you really can't screw this up. There's 2 different size screws that go in here. Just remember the oil pump takes the longer screws, and there's 4 of them. .40 inch-pounds. Calls for 12 to 60 inch-pounds, and I've got mine set up for 40. Starting with screws 1 and 2, which the cam plate is marked 1, 2, 3, 4. One. It's not that much. Rotate crankshaft 1 full revolution. Tighten screws 3 through 8 in the sequence shown, 90 to 120 inch-pounds. Just a note, make sure you did that last step with rotating the crankshaft or turning the back tire to help make sure that the oil pump is centered in its position or cage, if you will. The Harley-Davidson cam plate is not marked like some of the videos I've seen on the S&S and the fueling ones. The only ones that are marked are the oil pump, but the rest of them aren't. So you're going to have to look at your diagram to make sure that if you're using the stock. Now I did replace this cam plate. I don't know how much wear there was. I didn't put a gauge on there to measure it, but I figured go ahead and replace it since I've got this apart. So okay, so we've got 3, which is up here, and I've got 115 dialed in. And that's inch-pounds. Again, one more time, now after all the bolts on the cam plate, including the 4 oil pump bolts, are tightened or torqued, rotate the back tire again just to make sure that you don't hear any binding. Camshaft and crankshaft sprocket going to go on now without the chain to check for alignment. Make sure you put that spacer on the camshaft that was brought up in the beginning of the video. It goes underneath the sprocket. Crankshaft sprocket going on now. You just saw me put a thin washer, not the original washer, back on the bolt for the crankshaft sprocket so that we can measure alignment. "15 foot-pounds. 15. Both sprockets 15 foot-pounds. Here's 15. Here's where you're going to be measuring the cam and the sprocket alignment with. Use something straight like I used a steel ruler and a set of feeler gauges. Harley calls out for 9 thousandths or 0.009. In my case, I tried at first the 5 thousandths and it wouldn't go under, and then I went to the 2 thousandths. If I tried hard, I could get the 2 thousandths to work in there, so it was plenty good. Also keep in mind when you're measuring that, don't just push down on both of them at the same time. Try to lean towards the cam or lean towards the crankshaft sprocket, one or the other. That way if one's off, you'll actually see the gap on the other one. And where you're placing the steel rule, for example, is just on the face of both the cam and the sprocket, out by, not on the teeth, but just inboard of the teeth. This is just a reminder that the flat washer you use for the alignment check, make sure you get rid of that and put the original washer back on the crankshaft. So in my case, the stock washer underneath the camshaft is going to be fine. Even though I bought the cam spacer kit, I didn't need it. So there I was just trying to realign the chain on the original teeth that it was on, and also oiling the washers for the cam and crankshaft bolts to make a more accurate torque. Okay, 15 foot-pounds. Fifteen foot-pounds. Then back them off one complete turn. and then tighten them up. Final torque. "34 foot-pounds on the cam, 24 on the crank." "34 on the cam. I also bought the new cam support hardware kit, which is just the 2 bolts, crankshaft and camshaft. So they already came with Loctite on them, so make sure you get Loctite on yours if you're not buying new hardware. And that one's not the blue, that's the red that you want on this one, the high strength. At this point, your timing marks on your sprockets should be aligned like the picture below with the dots. "24 on the crank." Dots are lined up, marks on the chain. Okay, going back in with a chain tensioner. And these are 90 to 120 inch-pounds. And these are 90 to 120 inch-pounds. 100 inch-pounds. Okay, that should take care of most everything that I need to do as far as in the cam chest. Everything's been put back together except for the cover. So now on to what I had hoped to avoid the whole time was the push rods. And so obviously I took these out so that I could get a better idea of where they were. I've got these backed off so much that they're not even touching the cams. So right now this is on top dead center with the 2 marks on the sprockets. I also, just since I don't do this on a regular basis, wanted to confirm that. That's why earlier you probably saw me take a straw out of here. So if I rotate this wheel, you can see the straw is going back down. So I'm at the top of the stroke there. So watching those videos and such on TV, basically putting your fingers in there, should, with those marks on there top dead center, you should just feel the overlap of one starting to go up, the other starting to go down. And I do. And that also confirms with the straw up there that it's just on the edge of, it's top dead center. Just starting to come down. So we're good on that. So at this point now, it's just running, because this should be on overlap, which means that this side should be on the base lobes. So at this point now, it's pretty much just turning these adjustment rods so that you take up all the slack and bring them down to what's referred to as zero lash, which just means that there's no extra up and down slop in there. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay, so this is going to be zero lash right here. I've removed the excess slack in the push rod between the cups of the lifter and also the rocker. Since I have the Screaming Eagle torque cam installed with the Screaming Eagle push rods, that requires 2.5 full turns for me to get these adjusted correctly. If you have something different, you're going to need to see what your manufacturer calls for. Okay, so I went ahead and I did the back one first, or the intake. And since this is my first time doing this, so as I was turning the push rod to increase the length, these are flats, and it requires 2.5 full turns from zero lash. But as I was turning this, I got about 2 flats into it, and it just got tight. And I was like, wow, I mean, I expected it to get kind of snug, but it seemed like it got tight. So I just went 2 flats and I quit. And I gave it about 10 minutes just to make sure that that was indeed lifter resistance that I was facing. Actually, I backed it off and made sure that I was seated in the cups correctly, and I was, but so I went back, started again, like I said, about 2 flats into it, and got tight. So I waited about 10 minutes, came back, and it spun freely. So that's definitely what it is. It's just, it's hard to tell from those videos you watch where, you know, they're doing it, and then they cut away. And but so what I'm doing to not just burn up video is I go 1 complete turn. As you can see, the little circle right there, so that's your kind of your identifier. And these are those Screaming Eagle push rod tubes. I think the S&S, they probably have something similar too. But so I go 1 complete turn, and then I give it about 5-10 minutes just to make sure that you know, it spins freely again. Then I do the next turn, and then I do the half turn. So I've done the back, and I just finished the back, so that's a little bit snug still. But so I'm going to go ahead and do the front now, and then we'll have to wait to get those to spin freely before then I can turn the motor over to do the front side. Okay, so as I said earlier, I looked up the instructions for the torque cam install, and these are 2.5 complete turns on the adjustment of these. I already did the back, and as you can see now, that one is, you can turn it by a finger. So this one I've done 2 turns. There's my little circle. So I need to do 1/2 turn more. Then that back cylinder will be done. And this part really isn't, there's no rocket science to this. Just make sure that you get a stationary point and stick with it. So, so my little dot right there, I'm just gonna go 1/2 turn more. So that dot should be in the back when I'm done now, instead of facing me in the front. I think I got one more flat. Yep. One more. That should get it. Yes. Okay. Okay. So that one's done. Now the only thing that I am doing that's a little different, the manual doesn't say to do this. I have seen a couple videos online where they did it. Makes sense to me. I'm using just a pin drop of Permatex, the high temp locker on here, just for the jam nut, so this doesn't come undone. And as I said, I'm just putting just a hair of a drop because you don't want anything extra down in them tappets, I'm sure. So there shouldn't be any down here on these threads because I barely put any in there. So okay, so I'll wait about another 10-15 minutes to make sure that this one can turn like this back one freely. Then we'll turn the motor over so that we can do the front. So these backs, the back cylinder push rods spin freely. So those are bled down. So at this point now, I should be able to rotate the back wheel so that we can get this one on overlap and then this one on the base cam. Back ones aren't moving right now, which would be expected. Okay, since I had these push rods out, I actually cleaned them up a little bit, but I'm gonna go ahead and just put a real light coat of assembly lube on there. Okay, this was the intake. And the O-rings are good. I looked at them first. I imagine if you got these backwards, yeah, that's considerably shorter. So if you put them in backwards, I don't know if you even could when you took them out. Anyway, if you have them close to. Yeah, the exhaust is definitely longer. I think I've read that somewhere. So you can't screw that up. It's only going to be able to go, I dropped my O-ring, in one way. So unless you were starting from scratch, I guess we had them completely collapsed. That's the O-ring for that one. So in with the intake, the O-rings are there in position. At this point now, you start adjusting them out. Okay, so there's zero lash. Now you just repeat the process. 2.5 turns completely around. Get my little circle out in front of me so I have a reference point. Okay, so my exhaust on the front cylinder here, I just did the last half turn, so I got 2.5 turns on this, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten the jam that down. And like I said, I'm just going to put a dot on those threads. I certainly don't want this coming loose. Okay, so that obviously, that one needs to bleed down still. The back one's good, or the intake. We'll wait for that to bleed down, and then I'll put the pushrod tubes back on. This side I've already done over here. So we'll wait on that a few minutes, and then once I make sure that these can spin, then I'll roll this motor over one more time before I start closing this up, just to make sure that we don't hear anything binding. Okay, while I'm waiting on the lifter to finish up bleeding down over there, I'm going to go ahead and clean up these threads on the cam cover, since this has been on and off a few times now, and Loctite's been on a few times. That way I don't get threads that are buggered up with a bunch of Loctite. These are 1/4 by 20 threads. At this point now, yeah, so that spins easy, that spins easy. So the O-rings are in there. They look good shape. I already checked them earlier. Okay, so to put these on, basically the bottom part, want to seat that on the O-ring in there. Then the top part, kind of maneuver it around until you'll feel it kind of seat in the top O-ring. And then these, I think I probably have to do that one with a screwdriver. Just like that. Okay. Make sure that's seated. At this point, besides the cam cover, cam chest cover, that should be just about it in there. I'm going to rotate this through now that everything is bled down. One more time just to make sure that we don't have any binding. Okay, so everything there seems to be okay. I got all the plugs out, need to get those back in. Okay, so at this point now the timing cover is going to go back on. I do have a new gasket. And I had some powder work done. So I went ahead and picked up some the black hardware to go on here as well for the timing cover and stuff for the Milwaukee 8. New hardware, it's already got the thread locker on it. The kit also comes with black hardware for the tappet covers, but since I didn't change the tappet covers, they're chrome, it doesn't make any sense necessarily to put the black on there. So right now I'll just hang on to those for maybe later if I do something else. But otherwise, 90 to 120 inch-pounds. So I'll put them down to probably 100. Okay, finishing up the torque on this thing, 90 to 120 inch-pounds. I've got 100 dialed in here. And the manual shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the last one right there is 9. I've done them all already except for number 9. That's it. So that pretty much completes the cam pushrod part of the job there. I do have the plugs out. I'm going to change the plugs, so I'll need to get those back in. the wires, obviously the exhaust, the intake, and I've got some new levers that that I bought to match the edge cut design. So I'll get those back on. We'll see, maybe tomorrow. And but anyway, that completes most of this as far as the cam work. So hopefully that helps some folks out as far as the idea of changing the oil pump. Would I do it again? Yeah, and now that I've done it, I'm not as concerned about getting in there and changing a cam. I would even do a cam, because basically that's pretty much just about what I did, short of putting a new cam in there. So the only thing that I might throw out there, that if someone's watching this and you have the stock push rods, I don't know that I would go through this just to change the oil pump with the stock push rods, because the problem is, as you saw, the lifters, it looks like probably, even though I had this at top dead center, which was for this cylinder right here, these were still putting pressure on the cam. And the only thing I can think is, when I pulled that cam plate cover off, unless you're ready to go like that with the new oil pump and get in there and get that cam cover back on, the cam plate I should say, I don't know if they just they bleed down, they push out a little, but the cam plate would not align up. So that's why I had to go through all this to lengthen, or I should say shorten, the push rods so that I could get the cam plate back on. So I don't know exactly how that would work if you have the stock push rods as opposed to the adjustable ones. So I can't answer that if you've got that, you're not going to be able to adjust them. So you may keep that in mind if you're going to attempt this with the stock push rods and stuff in there. So, but as far as the rest of it, I mean, if I was doing this, I think I paid Harley for the torque cam kit. I mean, I think it was $399 for parts, and I think I paid like $400 for labor, $450. I would totally do this as far as putting a new cam in, the push rods, and all that. So anyway, thanks guys. Okay, here's the bike book back together. I have done a couple of dry cranks on this to make sure I had oil pressure, cranking it over with the plugs out. So I do have the heat shields off, because that ceramic black exhaust is a bitch to not scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and run it a couple times to make sure that the gaskets are definitely good and seated. I'll retorque those before I put those heat shields back on. So let's go ahead and start this thing up, see what's going to happen. There, so that should wrap this up. Sounds like everything came together okay. I'm going to take it on a ride and make sure there's no issues there, but